Hello, friends. You are listening to the Practical Tactical Penguin podcast. We're back after a sort of long hiatus caused by the pandemic and all of the various goings-ons that were happening alongside that. I am the Gun Penguin, and we're going to yammer at you for a while about a variety of topics from concealed carry to The Last of Us 2. Lately, I think we've been talking a lot about the idea that you should only have one gun. I think for a long time, both of us kind of maybe considered that there was something out there that would let us own only one gun that would do everything. That would be your range gun, your concealed carry gun, something to function as sort of a home defense piece. But I think we've kind of arrived at the idea that that's incredibly difficult and nothing really fits the bill. It kind of looked like the P365 XL might, or maybe the Glock 43X with the shield mags, but the shield mags for me have not really lived up to what I expected them to do, and I think you might have felt the same way about the 365 XL, right?
Yeah, well, the shield mags for sure, they've been having some pluses and minuses, and I've personally, I've not been seeing many reports, but I've been personally having very bad luck with the P365 magazines, and it seems like with the shield magazines, it's, split. Like, half the people are like, this is the best thing ever, it's a game changer, and then some people are saying, please do not trust these, they're absolutely not reliable. So until we get more, unbiased information out there, for sure the shield mags are off the table for me personally. How about you?
Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel. So they work fine in perfect range conditions. If you keep them clean, well-oiled, no dirt ever gets near them, they only stay in a mag pouch, they're fine. But as soon as any sort of external variable is added, sand, rain, whatever, that's when the problems start. So it's really difficult to fit 15 rounds in that tiny space, and that's difficult as it is to get the tolerances right. And then they had Checkmate make the fucking magazines, and I for the life of me, I don't understand. Anybody who's used a Checkmate Beretta magazine understands why that was a terrible idea.
Yeah, out of all the companies to choose.
Yeah. And what about you with the 365? What specifically has been happening with the magazines?
Sure. Well, what we've kind of been talking about was I very specifically over the last year or so have been trying to do a Project One gun, which is where you find one gun that you can carry literally every single day and also, get better with. So practice with, train with, take classes with. Also, if it could work for home defense or something like that. We were talking about something like the Glock 43X, if they ever release a light rail version, being a pretty good option for like on-duty carry or something for people with smaller hands or people that have trouble holding on. I mean, I'm used to the Glock grip feel, especially prior to Gen 5, where you can get a slimmer feel with no back straps. But, I mean, I'm having trouble with it. So the basic idea was like even the samurai, we've been talking about the history of weapons and how they work with people. And even the samurai would tend to have two swords. They would have the katana, which was like the long sword. And then they would have something smaller for a backup or for less nobility. A lot of times it was a sign of power. You would only be able to carry a smaller sword called a wakizashi or something like that. And it was a small sword. So the idea for me was that the longsword or the katana, the battle weapon, would be a rifle or a shotgun of some sort. And then your one handgun, your smaller everyday carry, little sword that you'd carry into town, or your barbecue sword would be your wakizashi, or like some sort of handgun that could do it all. And what I think we're both kind of finding is we're just not there yet, I don't think. We're getting close because the 43X and the XL and the Hellcat and stuff, they're good enough at all of those things to be competent, I guess, but there's just still some little idiosyncrasies that are holding them back, and I don't think we're there yet. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. I don't think the idea has been refined to the point where we can say, oh, it's time to commit. So my hope was similar to yours. I was thinking, on my kit, I've got my Cry JPC too, so that I can dress up like a total dickbag. at the range, and I've got my cool, AR-15 and stuff so that I can look like a super cool operator guy when I'm getting up from the couch to go get a Red Bull out of the fridge. It's great. But I realized that in my LARPing, the pistol is largely unnecessary if you're doing your reloads correctly and sort of looking after your ammo and managing it the right way. Hopefully you'll never have to use the pistol. So I was thinking, okay, this gun is going to hold 15 rounds. It's smaller than any of my Glocks. It's great. And this is the 43X, by the way. So this will take the place of any other handgun that I carry on all my garbage. But in actual practice, it's got to work every time, and if the shield mags are having trouble with sand and they're having some kind of malfunction one every 300 rounds, I look at the Glock 45 and I say, well, it's never had a malfunction, so maybe it's worth it to just carry a little bit more weight. But I think that it's going to really take, in the case of the Glock 43X, it's going to take Glock designing the magazine and producing it the Glock way with Glock plastic using Glock production techniques. Nobody else is really going to get this right unless they have, I don't know, like if Metgar had made that magazine for Shield, I think it would have been right. But they're going to have to charge $60 or $70 for the magazine, and I'm not opposed to doing that. If that's what it takes to make the magazine work, then fuck it, I'll pay the $60. That's fine. But they're going to have a quality manufacturer produce it, or the best option would be to have Glock actually produce the magazine. That's really the answer that I'd like to see.
Right, but then you have the same problem where if Glock's doing the metal sleeve with the polymer overcoat, then you're going to have it be a Glock 19 size.
Yeah, that's the problem. So one of the things that I've heard often, mostly from new shooters, is they say, the magazine is so huge, why can't you fit more bullets in even just like a Glock 17 magazine, for instance? And the polymer just has to be
with HK.
Oh yeah. Well, now in the case of HK, that's a different story. In the case of HK, they had a sort of internal belief that more than 15 rounds was prone to malfunction, so that's why they capped their 9mm magazines at 15 rounds for a long time. It's strange, but that's HK. They have some weird shit that they like to do, and that was the deal with the 15s. But new shooters have asked, why can't you fit more rounds in this magazine? It's just the plastic has to be a certain thickness in order to be rigid enough and durable enough to be a gun magazine. And so like you said, I don't know if they can be that much thinner, but it would be nice to see Glock try. Or hell, I'm almost okay with the magazine being a little bit, with the grip being a little bit fatter to accommodate a slightly fatter magazine. If there's a way to make a 12 or 13 rounder, that might be a decent compromise. I don't know. What do you think?
No, that makes a lot of sense. I got to say my HK joke. Maybe it was because maybe they can only fit 15 rounds because they were loading the magazines backwards.
That's right. They were really 21 rounders the whole time.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't know that about it being an internal policy, kind of like all the weird Ruger stuff 10 years ago. But that makes a lot of sense. I just remember people saying all the time, like, oh, why is because the VP9 and the P30 are about 17 sized. And I've always just heard like, oh, why it's only 15 when Glock and M&P and every Springfield and everyone gets 17. And I will say the P30 magazines are by far the easiest to load of any full-size magazine, which I thought might be a factor. And then also they seem to be like bomb-proof reliable, but you're also paying for it. They tend to be pricier.
Yeah, and on that note, let me tell you an HK anecdote. So at the beginning of the year, I get an email from HK that was like, 4 P30 magazines for $100. So I see that, and I'm like, 4 P30 magazines for $100? Sign me the fuck up. So I get online, I order them. I think I may have ordered 2 lots of them. And then 2 weeks later, I see, oh, those motherfuckers. They were trying to get rid of the 15s because they were putting the 17s out right after that. So, so now I got a bunch of 15 rounders.
That's still a real good deal.
Yeah, it was a great deal, and it's not really a problem. It's just that's just classic HK. Sort of looking for a way to cash in on the consumer that might not be in the consumer's best interest, or alternatively, ignoring what the consumer wants for 10 years before finally giving in. Either way, both of those are the HK approach to everything.
I don't know, man. That doesn't sound at all like them. If only we had some evidence.
Yeah, that's right. Like them doing it over and over and over again every few years.
Yep.
By the way, the P30, I will say, it's the closest to the one gun that I've ever sort of personally felt, because it has that smaller front end. The grip doesn't feel quite as bulbous as a Glock grip. So
Yeah.
on multiple occasions, I've thought, if I was going to commit to one gun, this feels like it might be one to commit to. But the only issue with it is you're not really going to be able to find a good assortment of holsters for every situation. You're kind of going to have to commit to some sort of outside the waistband option. And then don't get me wrong, there are some inside the waistband options, but just not nearly as many as Glock. You're kind of just stuck with whatever you can get your hands on. It may not be the most comfortable one for you,
Yeah, I definitely found that as well, because I did have the HK P30 as my primary for, I want to say, like 3 or 6 months, and it is near perfect. It's very similar in shape to the Glock 45, where it's kind of a little bit stubbier of a top end and the grip feels fantastic. But what I was finding was it was just heavy and long enough that there would be times I could not carry it. Like in a suit or something where you have to tuck it and you have to have your belt not look like you're carrying 2 pounds of metal and polymer on you. And so the P30 and the one benefit of the P30 as a one gun or a primary of that sort would be, it's got to be one of the most tested handguns of all time, and it will last. I think it was like 91,000 documented rounds or something like that they have on their test P30. So if you're going to pick one, and durability was a big problem, also comfort, the adaptability of the grip, you can make that grip fit just about anyone perfectly with all the different back straps and side panels. The P30 would be a good choice, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. The only downside is, having it cut for optics. That's become incredibly important to me. Largely from your influence, You sort of convinced me to finally take the plunge. And don't get me wrong, there are ways to have it cut for optics, but the folks have to weld a plate in there and then mill down into the plate, because if you've ever seen the inside of a P30, there are huge voids in the slide, and that's great because it keeps the gun lighter than it would be were those voids not there. But it makes it so that if you started milling, you would just mill into empty space, and there'd be nothing to mount the RMR to. So yeah, I wish that there were optics options, especially one straight from the factory.
Yeah, it honestly surprised me, because even the VP9 I don't think has a factory optica, does it?
It does. They just got around to releasing an optics-ready VP9 finally.
Okay. So, I mean, the VP9 is different internally, but that's a good option, I guess, if you want the similar characteristics to the P30, just with a striker instead of a hammer. I mean, the VP9 might be a good choice, I guess.
Yeah, and it's a cool gun. I mean, the VP9's an awesome gun, but if I'm going to go with a striker-fired gun, the VP9 is it's not my favorite. I don't like those ears at the back, the cocking ears. How do you feel about those?
No, I just don't like the VP9 that much. I've tried, and if I was going to not choose Glock for striker fired, I think that the M&P 2.0s are real nice. I'm a big fan of the PPQ,
Me too.
Especially with the paddle release. That's my favorite one, and they have an optic cut. I think it's called the TAC P4 TAC or something like that. Yeah, the VP9 just wouldn't be on my list, I don't think, which is frustrating because once they introduced it to the American market and it was so popular, it seems like they've completely disregarded the P30 side of the house.
Yeah, so the P30 is one of those guns that I really think if there had been continued development, I think it could have become something truly spectacular. Don't get me wrong, it's already spectacular, but I mean, it could have potentially become one of the finest hammer-fired guns available. And
there's
arguably
no support or aftermarket or anything.
Yeah, exactly. And arguably it already is in terms of the design you're getting from the factory, but there's not much you can do with it once you get it. By that I mean, even with the USP, there was the match trigger kit that you could get. And the USP and some of the others just are a little bit more adaptable than the P30, and I think it needed some of that modularity. Like, for instance, if you buy the P30S, you can't just remove the safety to convert it to the one that I've got. you have to go and buy a completely different gun. And I hear a lot of people complaining in the comments under my P30 videos about that, and that's completely fair. That's an entirely fair criticism.
Yeah, if it was, there's so many versions. I think there's 4 versions of the P30. There's the version 1, which is LEM. Then there's light LEM. Then there's double single. Then with a decocker. Then I think there's a single action only, or there's one with a safety. And if it doesn't seem like you can just like convert across the board, you can convert this version to this version, but not this version, and it's just too confusing and not user configurable enough that you have to do so much. Like I remember I had the light LEM version. You have the decocker version, right?
Yeah, and I didn't know there was a single action only version. That's cool if there is. That's
I
awesome.
think there is. I may have misspoke, but I think that there is. And it's just like I had to do a butt ton of research to even find out what an LEM was, because you try it at the gun store and rack the slide. It's mushy, long single action, and then you go to pull the trigger again, and it's a very heavy double action, and you're like, why is an LEM special? What's different about it? They're kind of like on the Beretta train of not really informing their consumers of what their products and their offerings even are.
Yeah, and by the way, everybody always tells me when I complain about HK triggers to switch to the LEM. I've used the LEM extensively, for the record, all you people out there, but it's not the answer for me because I really like having the super long, heavy DA pull initially. I know you still get the long pull at the start, but you don't get that heavy weight, and I really like that. That's one of the reasons that I like hammer-fired guns so much. So for me, an LEM is not a substitute for a DASA gun. I will say, though, it's nice that the reset is a little bit shorter, but again, people act like the LEM triggers are so much fucking better when really just the reset's slightly shorter. It's not radically different. It's still a lousy P30 trigger,
Yeah, even the reset coming from literally any other striker fire gun on the market, it's still an atrocious reset on the LEM. I think the misstated part of the LEM is it's really good if you're coming from a striker fire gun, because that pretty much the whole travel is under a pound of pressure, and then you get to a definitive wall just like a striker fired gun, but you still have all that hammer travel. If you like double action, single actions, you are not going to like the LEM trigger. If you're coming to a hammer after being inundated with striker triggers, it makes the transition a lot easier. I personally had a very easy time with the LEM trigger. However, going down that path, now I like with the double action only revolver with Berettas, I'm definitely more on your side now, where I appreciate the weight of the travel, not just the travel. You can stage the trigger and prep the trigger, and I like that extra weight for the first shot. So if you're into that, the LEM or the light LEM, which is even lighter, it's not going to be your cup of tea. But if you're dipping your toes in the water of the hammer fire game, it makes the transition a lot easier.
Is that what made you go with the LEM initially?
Yeah. I tried them all, and I thought the LEM would be an easier transition for me, and it was. It was very intuitive, coming from someone who, up to that point, I would say 95% of my overall shooting experience had been with a striker fire trigger of some sort.
But do you think it would be better for someone switching over to buy an LEM, use it for a while, and then switch to a sort of proper DASA mechanism, or do you think it's better to just get the DASA gun to begin with and just go through the painful experience of having to learn that first pull? What do you think the best approach to that is?
Personally, probably the second, but convincing them they should do that, I think, is going to be the issue. So, like, up until with the last year or two, if you would have brought up, for instance, a Beretta to me, I would have been like, psh, 2 trigger pulls, nah, no thank you. Glock's consistent, it's the same every time, I get to the wall. I think it's hard to talk someone with that mindset into the benefits of a double action, single action with a very heavy, deliberate first trigger press. And then, I don't know how is the P30 trigger crisp after that, like a Beretta, or is it still kind of mushy in the single action?
It's nothing like a Beretta. It's so, the Beretta trigger little bit of take up, super crisp wall, and then just a little bit of travel rearward. The P30, you hit a wall, you kind of slop around in the wall for a little bit, kind of slipping and sliding. You pull it rearward, and somewhere in there, the gun goes off. But that also makes it one of the safest triggers ever. You have a lot of time to reverse course, and I see, given the intended use of this gun, I understand why they designed the trigger that way, because it's not that HK can't make a crisp trigger. You know, the USPs with the match kit, that's a very crisp trigger. This was obviously an intentional choice. I'm not saying that I like the trigger, but you can reverse course and say, no, I don't want to put a hole in that thing and back off even past the point where you feel like, hey, it probably was going to go off. So I like that.
Yeah, right. Well, it's just it gives you extra processing time. It's a kind of a thinking trigger. I don't know, man. After delving really deeply into the revolver, it definitely caused me to I've gotten better using the revolver in a short period of time than I have in a long time. I kind of hit a plateau, and I wasn't really seeing much improvement. I was seeing improvement, but not substantially. And after spending so much time on the heavy, long double-action revolver, I personally find a lot of benefit in it. And if I spend too much time on a double-action heavy trigger and then go back to the striker fire triggers, I notice sloppiness coming back, just in terms of like, you get to the wall, you line up your sights, and then you try to like slam through the weight, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And with a double-action longer trigger, heavier trigger, I don't think the heaviness really matters as much, but you can kind of work through that trigger, and I don't know, it's hard to describe. It would be easier to show it in a video, but I'm definitely seeing benefit to it that I don't know if you would have been able to convince me without the LEM. So that's a very long, protracted way of saying I think that the LEM still has a place, but personally now in my journey, I'm not a super huge fan of it as well. So,
that's actually a great explanation of your journey, I think. And so speaking of, what has made you realize more than anything else that it's not really viable to just have one gun? And other than the failed experiment with the 365 and the 43X, besides that, what has really pushed you to say, I've just got to have more specialized pieces of equipment?
Well, definitely, I think the reliability and the failure rate of smaller weapon platforms across the board. It's not like a specific company I'm harping on. I think just looking at the internal slide, so for instance, I think Glock is very reliable. Just looking at the internal dimensions of the parts on the slimline pistols, it's hard for me to imagine they will be as reliable long term as their bigger siblings. So like the Glock 45, for instance, if you open that slide and then open the 43X slide, there's a substantial difference in overbuiltness of those components.
Sure.
The SIGs have, I think they're on the 4th or 5th secret generation where they just keep rolling, changing things that are catastrophically breaking. So like if you look at SIG videos, it'll be like, oh, well, what's your P365's birth date? Mine born in April 2019 is flawless. So if you have to go by manufacturer dates, I don't think that is a very reliable system at this point. I've had so much experience with smaller guns, just not being where they need to be for high round counts, right? The LCP will break itself. I had three different Smith & Wesson bodyguards before I finally gave up the little 380s. They would just, different parts would snap and break. The only small guns I see that are fairly reliable is the wheel guns, but even those, mechanically, people say they don't fail. They fail consistently, and their failures tend to be more catastrophic, where you can't fix it easily in the field. And I don't know when the last time you opened a revolver was, but those things are like a watch inside. There's some complicated machinery going on in there.
Yeah, one of the worst experiences I've ever had cleaning a gun was I had shot my 44 Magnum at one point so much that it was starting to get gummed up, and I looked at it and I said, holy fuck, I'm going to have to detail strip this Red Hawk. and trying to figure out how everything went back together. And the Red Hawk isn't even a particularly complicated revolver inside compared to some of the older ones that I've looked in. My God, that was a miserable experience. Anyway, just wanted to share that. Sorry to interrupt.
No, was that before the channel?
No, that was during. I just didn't film it because I didn't want anybody to have to watch me fumble around for. I mean, it was an embarrassingly long time before I got it back together. It really was. It was a long time. It probably took an hour to get it back together.
You should have. I would have enjoyed watching you bumble through it and finally get it fixed. And you could have called it like a Red Hawk comedy of errors or something, and just experience that with you. Because I'm not opening my revolver. I've never opened one. I've seen the parts, and I'm good. I don't want to mess with that.
Yeah, you really don't.
That kind of at this point with our current options, that kind of disqualifies the small guns for me for a Project 1 gun. And then the problem is service size weapons are at this point. I mean, it's a golden age. We have like $400 IWI Masadas that are ultra reliable, all the way up to like $2,500 Gucci Glocks. Allegedly, companies like Triarch and Staccato have figured out how to make a 2011 reliable, and like you pretty much can run the gamut from $250 to $20,000 and get a reliable handgun, but they're large and heavy usually. Even like I carried a Glock 17 for like 4 years, and it was just large enough. Granted, the 17 is very late for its size and capacity, but it's just big enough that I couldn't carry it every day. And that also kind of disqualifies it. So we're kind of in a weird area where both of them, both like big guns and little guns, could hypothetically be an okay Project 1 gun, but neither of them can do everything. So I almost feel like we have to kind of take the ancient samurai sword of a long sword and a small sword and do that with handguns as well, not handguns and long guns. So at this point, personally, I'm feeling like you kind of need a super, super deep concealment gun and then a gun for everything else. So it's not really a Project 1 gun as much as it is a Project 2 gun. But I have just like with red dots, in 5 years, I think it will be rare to see a handgun without one. I think in like 5 or 10 years, either SIG or Glock or a new company we haven't even heard of yet, someone is going to figure out that perfect middle ground of kind of like a compact, subcompact Glock 43X, SIG P365 size that does almost everything a civilian needs a handgun to do. And that's a big distinguishing point, is a civilian. I don't think it will ever replace it for military or law enforcement, but I think we'll get to a point where one handgun does everything the average civilian needs a handgun to do.
That's fair. Well, and I could even see it eventually possibly replacing a service-sized pistol in a military context. Not in every military context, but let's say you're a special forces guy, you do a lot of stuff in the field, and you know you're going to need a pistol, but you don't need a pistol that often. Maybe you want to cut, 10 or 15 ounces of weight and a lot of size off of your gun, so you take the smaller one that holds 15 rounds instead of something like like the M17, which, God, I feel so bad for anyone who has to actually use that thing long term.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, every pound is another AR mag. So that's a good point. And if I mean, I'm not military or law enforcement, but if I was going to know I was going to a prolonged firefight, I would rather take another AR mag than a slightly larger handgun. So I think that's a good point.
Well, and this will lead nicely into our discussion of strange guns. But let's first talk about what three guns we would commit to. And I don't mean rifles, obviously that's a completely different thing, but to carry our samurai metaphor. So samurai during most of the Japanese feudal period actually carried three blades. They carried the katana, they carried a wakizashi, and they carried a tanto, which is a smallish knife. I mean, it's still a very large knife by modern standards, but
right.
So they had three blades on them, a large sword, small sword, large knife. So we can sort of choose our three guns, sticking with our samurai metaphor. And by the way, they were using the knives sort of in a similar way to a Western sword fighter, sometimes used in conjunction with the sword, sometimes used separately, and that's kind of how the wakizashi would have been used as well. But and something else worth noting that also really helps us with our sword metaphor. Swords are not a primary weapon in the same way that a pistol is never a primary weapon. So throughout history, a sword has always been a sidearm. A spear is traditionally the primary weapon, or something similar. A sword is a lousy, ineffective weapon next to something like a really good lance or spear, because you have all of that reach and all of that power being focused by a man on horseback or just a man lunging at you. So, with the exception of the Romans with their short sword, a sword has really not ever been a primary weapon. So, we'll choose our three sort of modern swords. What would you choose if you had to commit to three pistols?
It would be a large service style caliber and probably a NATO caliber, so 9mm. Pretty much any of the ones we've been talking about: a P30, a Glock 17. A Beretta. I think I would have to have a larger service style firearm with relatively high standard capacity, capability to have an optic and or weapon mounted light. At this point, I might choose a Beretta, just because I think it would be the most interesting, and I get that double action, single action trigger. Second would be some sort of smaller, compact Glock 19 style firearm, preferably that uses the same magazines as the bigger one. I'm thinking of this one as kind of like an everyday carry for the majority of days when you're, dressed casually or going out about the town. So if I'm going to be sticking with that, it would be a Beretta compact or a Glock 19 if I'm going with the Glock 17. And then the third firearm would be probably a different caliber. So I'm thinking a 32, a 38 special, a 380, something very tiny that will fit easily on an ankle or in a pocket or tucked super deep concealment. Something like the J-frame snubby or a Glock 42 or a 30-32 Tomcat, something like that. And I'm specifically thinking a smaller caliber because they tend to be substantially lighter than their 9mm brethren. So I was really into the Glock 43 and the Glock 42. And once the Glock 43 came out, people would say, oh, the Glock 42 is completely, it's done now because the 9mm's out. And the entire Glock 42 weighs less than the slide of the Glock 43. I weighed them. I have a whole video on my channel of me weighing all the different components. And for deep concealment, there is a huge benefit to the lightest possible gun possible. And like the Beretta 21A, the little 22, the thing weighs like 10 ounces. You can put that literally anywhere. Where you couldn't with a 9mm version like the Glock 43 or the PPQ or the Shield. So for the third one, it's going to be a smaller mouse gun caliber, the tiniest, lightest version I can find. I would have no problem with a 32 or even a 22 with modern day ammo. And it reminds me back to the in-range video recently. I think it was a Q&A where Carl was saying we think of like cowboy guns being these giant revolvers on hip holsters and, akimbo revolvers. And the most common gun of the Old West, of the foundation of America, was a tiny pocketable 32 revolver. And I feel like that's kind of, even with the Tanto and the Japanese samurai, we need something tiny that can go everywhere. And it's not a UTX-70, obviously, as you were saying. The Tanto was a larger fixed blade. But I think that a 32 mouse gun or a 380 or even a 38 special could kind of fill that role as the tertiary, deep concealment, non-permissive environment type handgun. So that was my long explanation. I think that's my list, just brainstorming it out right now. What do you think? What did I do wrong?
No, I think that's a great list. It also sticks very well with our incredibly weird samurai metaphor that I'm really enjoying.
Yeah,
it fits perfectly.
Yeah,
you've got your sword, smaller sword, and knife, and I think that's perfect. And I think that even if you look at Western arms during the same period and Western arms even up to I don't know, even up to the Civil War, you actually still see this sort of need for kind of 3 different sizes of arms in almost every period, of sidearms, I should say. So that's really interesting. Like you have naval pistols, officers' pistols, army pistols, cavalry pistols, and they all are different sizes, and they're all fulfilling different niches. So I think that's really interesting. So I don't know. I think that's an awesome list in my opinion.
Well, thank you. It was brainstormed on the spot. What would you choose? Is it anything different, or?
I mean, pretty similar. I mean, I think the only thing that I would change is my medium-sized gun would be smaller. It would sort of bridge the gap a little bit more, probably, just because I'm shorter. You know, I'm a shorter, smaller person. I can benefit from a smaller gun. I'm 5'8", so something like, well, hang on, I'll start at the top of my list after I cough. So I would start with I do. I got the old swine flu. So I would probably start my list with either the Glock 45 or the P30 or the Beretta 92. For me, I shoot all of those guns exactly the same. They're virtually interchangeable. I prefer the Beretta. The Beretta has been the most reliable, but it's not the easiest to carry. It's not the easiest necessarily to find aftermarket parts for. So I don't know. I think a pretty solid argument could be made for any one of those 3. For my middle gun, even though it didn't do what I wanted it to, the Glock 43X has still been a great gun. I love it. It's been awesome. But in a similar size, the Makarov. I've had amazing luck with the Makarov lately. I would probably stick the Makarov in there, and then my small gun would be the 30-32. It would have originally been a small Colt Agent, but I've actually found that the Tomcat is more reliable than the Colt, if you can believe it. I know that's going to make a couple of y'all have a fucking heart attack, but I've found the Tomcat to be more reliable. So there you go. That's my list.
It's also considerably easier to shoot quickly.
Absolutely. And it contains more ammo, and I can reload it in a flash, and it's lighter and it's smaller. It's just a great gun.
Yeah, I did half of them. I took a low light, no light class last night, and half of the class I used the J-frame snubby revolver, and it's difficult to load quickly with light. It is a chore to if you run out of ammo and you're holding a flashlight or something, you're not, just run away. Where with the Beretta you could reload it.
Yeah, and in fact, I've gotten my reload times down to where they're not that different from a standard auto. The only thing that I'll say is that since it doesn't lock open, I actually count out loud. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I know it's time to switch because I don't want to have to run the slide because it's really hard to run it. So I just shoot it until there's still one left in the chamber, and then swap it out. And you can swap them pretty fast like that. It's remarkably quick.
And you'll really throw off the bad guy counting out loud.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
They'll think that I have. You know, he's like, did I try to rob the fucking count? Yeah, I should start doing it like a 1, a 2, a 3. That's terrifying. You should run if you are trying to rob someone and they start to count like the count from Sesame Street. You need to get the fuck out of there. It's time to fucking leave.
Something is gonna happen. Yeah, something is gonna happen, and you don't know at what number. And it's like, we're gonna leave before 10 because I don't know what's happening.
You are absolutely going to get tied up in a basement, and Big Bird's going to do some stuff to you. It's going to happen. That's what's going to happen with you.
Do you remember that early YouTube sketch? Man, it had to have been 10, 12 years ago, like early YouTube, where it was like, I'm going to tie you to the radiator and grape ya. Do you remember that one? It was like a guy dressed up like a grape.
Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do remember that.
Dude, that was so old. I remember I think it was in college, but it's like, oh, we're gonna grape ya, which now it's not that would not fly, but
no.
Early YouTube was very different.
Jokes. Yeah.
Early YouTube was very different than like Grand Thumb videos now, where they're like little movies. Like back in the day, it was Nut and Fancy farting on his workbench table, being like, "So we're going to talk about SKSs for 2 hours."
Yeah, I like that he tells you what he's going to talk about. Like, he's like, and then we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to talk about this. And I'm like, or you could just have fucking talked about it and not...
Well, he's got to get in his review of a model airplane for 30 minutes.
Yeah, and he's got to tell you all the different reasons. Some guys do this, but I do this, man. And let me tell you, this is the most successful YouTube, man. We're the most successful. I'm the most successful. And he has like a fucking Trump attack anytime he starts a video, or he has to just tell you how fucking great he is and all the things he's accomplished. That's really
Well, he is tremendous. He's the best. He's gonna build the wall and make China pay for it.
That's right. Yeah, nothing fancy is gonna build the wall.
Yeah, when I brought up the YouTube, I'm gonna grape your thing. It's like, oh, I forgot that we were recording right now.
Oh, we don't do graping anymore.
No, that would not fly now.
Yeah, Harvey Weinstein, noted grapist.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we should really call winemakers. They should be called grapists.
There you go.
That would be great.
Actually really good.
Yeah. So, so have you had trouble getting ammo? Well, that sounds like I'm starting an ad. Have you had trouble getting ammo during the quarantine? For the low price of $19.99?
Have you had a loaded magazine for more than 4 hours?
If so, please consult with a doctor. Yeah. So have you had trouble finding ammo, and what have you been shooting during this strange ammo drought, and why?
Oh man, yes, very much so. They actually had they got a whole, I think it was a pallet or two of 9mm ammo at the range I was at last night. They got it in the morning and it was all gone by the evening. They had a few boxes left. So yeah, ammo is going ridiculously fast. I have purchased, I think I've gotten about 2,000 or 3,000 rounds of 9 since the pandemic started from Supervel, because they have a notification list and they haven't raised their prices, so it was still $185 per thousand, and they let their alumni or their previous buyers get first dibs at everything they make. But even they're out of primers. They're having a bring your own primer program right now. So if you find small pistol primers, you can send them to them and they will load it for you, which is cool. But I can't find primers anywhere either. So yeah, the round count has gone significantly down. I've still shot probably a few thousand rounds since the pandemic started. I've taken 3 classes since the pandemic started. So I'm definitely working through my stockpile, but I'm getting to the point, I have a point set where I'm not going to go below that, and that's coming up way quicker than I would have liked. So the ammo, the supply chain is not looking good. I was just listening to Gun Nuts Media, Caleb Giddings, and he was talking to industry people. There's, I believe, 6 companies that load all the domestic civilian ammunition, and they make like 8 trillion, I want to say, or billion rounds a year, and they're already done with that. So like 2021 is probably not going to be super great, and that's very dependent on the upcoming election. They said regardless of who wins, if a Democrat wins, there's normally a run on ammunition. So if Trump wins again, hopefully 2021 or 2022, ammunition will start to come back to where it was before. But if Biden wins, then, I mean, we could have a series, it could be like the Obama 22 shortage, but for everything, which is very scary to me. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially your assessment of the political situation is that's what always happens. That's what'll happen. So, even though like I tend to be more liberal. I mean, I would consider myself basically a moderate. This is a weird situation to be in because like Obama didn't actually do anything particularly anti-gun. That's the weird thing.
He didn't win though.
Yeah, he tried, but nothing ever really happened. And under Trump, we've actually lost far more than we did under Obama. But my fear is
in less time.
In less times. But my fear is, I think that Biden, because of the situation, it would not surprise me if he ended up making that sort of one of his core moves during the first 100 days specifically. And the reason I say that is that has been one of the most talked about items on the list for the Democrats in all of the debates. That's been sort of just a huge fixation. And one of the reasons that I was so pro Bernie Sanders and was the election prior is that, Bernie, though he hardened on guns this time around, generally the guy just doesn't seem to give a shit about guns, and I really like that. Just leave him the fuck alone, Bernie. And I really appreciated that, and I would have felt a lot more comfortable going forward if Bernie had been the candidate. But I think that if Trump wins, the ammo situation will get better, and we'll probably still lose gun rights. So I think either way, on the gun end, we're kind of fucked one way or another. Oh, it just feels like a lose-lose no matter what. It just feels like either way we're gonna have to sacrifice something big. What do you think? Is that too cynical?
No, I actually kind of, I don't know, I'm kind of a little bit opposite because I tend to be more conservative. I'm definitely, as you are, moderate, but more on the conservative side, and you're kind of more on the liberal side of centrist. And I'm almost kind of thinking that we will lose less rights with Biden as long as the House and the Senate stay conflicted, because, the Congress. With Obama, he tried to propose a similar, Democratic talking point, gun control, but it was so contested and shot down because anytime there's a Democrat in power, Republicans really rally against them regardless of what it is. So I kind of feel like if it's Biden, then all the Republicans will rally against it and stop it. Where when Trump just sweepingly bans stuff, or people don't seem to have any principles or values around it. Like, they have no principled reason why. It's just a Republican in the White House, so they go along with it. I don't know. I'm kind of brainstorming here. I think we might lose less with Biden, even though he has a more anti-gun stance, because it will not, be passed quietly behind some other thing. He's already mentioned he has several assault weapon bans, and that's one of his promises, is to ban assault weapons like in 1994. And I don't know how much of it is like NRA scare tactics, but he has a gun tax and a magazine tax and all this stuff, allegedly. I haven't looked into it very deeply. But all the Trump stuff is scary to me because he is the guy that said take the guns first, due process later.
Yes.
And
yeah.
no one pushes back on it. And we've lost more in 3 years of a Republican than we did in 8 years of a Democrat, because when there's a Democrat in office, the Republicans all rally to fight. And when I don't know, I'm just kind of rambling here, but
no, you're not.
It's such a slippery situation because I think both suck, and I don't know which one will be less sucky. Either way, we're going to lose stuff.
Right. No, that's actually an incredibly good point. And one of the things that has terrified me about Trump has been that he's going to try to circumvent Congress entirely. Like his MO is not, I'm anti-gun, so I'm going to work with members of Congress to pass a bill. He goes straight for the executive order, which is something that he criticized Obama for. He is far more likely to use an executive order, or alternatively simply to pressure the ATF in one way or another.
That's the one that scares me because they don't. That's the one that scares me because they don't pass anything. They just write a stupid letter. So like already we're seeing the Shooting Sports Foundation released an article that they spoke with people in the ATF, and the whole pistol brace thing is not currently being considered by the ATF. So that was kind of like a false scare a few weeks ago, if you believe the information. But like, how much of our gun rights? I was listening to Tactical Rifleman. It just released a rifle for his company, and he specifically chose a 13.7 or 13.9 pinned and welded, so that you could have a stock, the ATF can't mess with your braces, etc., etc. And someone said, well, that's silly because he's very anti-pistol brace because they can just be ridden out of common use, right? With a letter overnight, just like with bump stocks, just like with the Franklin Armory, whatever we talked about last time, we're just overnight, this is no longer okay. And someone said, well, just as easily, the ATF could say no more pin and welding, the barrel has to be 16. Well, that's a much smaller demographic of the gun-owning public. We were talking about this. There's got to be millions of pistol braces out there at this point, right? In common use.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, there could be as many as 10 million, depending on. Now that's me just sort of pulling a number out of the air, but here's the reason I think so.
It sounds
that
legit. I mean,
that previous. Yeah, that previous letter mentioned that there were at least 3 million of one sort of pistol brace. So if that's just one particular model, there's got to be at least 10 million total, right? Wouldn't you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because the Shockwave was so popular, and then the Blade, and now the SBA 3. That's what I was going to say. I don't know. I know one person locally that has a pinned and welded. I think it's a 13.7 with a B.E. Myers 249. It's like 16.1 pinned and welded. I know one person. When I go to rifle classes, I would say the pistols outnumber the carbines 3-1 probably, because it's just such a convenient size for a civilian to have. I mean, inside your house or at the range where you're sitting down or standing anyway. A pistol with a pistol brace is so convenient. One of the hardest things to ban, I think, at this point will be pistol braces, because enough people have them that there will be problems if they try to ban it, where pinning and welding or bump stocks, like, they're so rare at this point that it's kind of like the whole when they came for this, I didn't stand up, and when they came for this, I didn't stand up. When they came for the bump stocks, no one stood up because it's a silly gimmick. When they came for the pinned and welded barrels, no one stood up because not many people have them. But when they come for the pistol braces, that's going to be a big deal. But Trump immediately goes to the ATF and pressures them, which is the one that could cause us by far the most damage, at least in the short term. So I think that's a very good point you were making, is every president, it seems, goes to executive order more and more. So like when Bush Jr., W, was doing it, it was like, oh my gosh, he's done it the most of anyone. Then Obama one-upped W. Now Trump has like doubled Obama's executive orders. It's like, at what point does this get out of hand, going straight to the ATF and executive order with no input, and then all the other Republicans don't fight it because it's not a Democrat in the White House? I don't know. I think Biden might be better, which sounds like heresy.
Well, no, I think that's entirely sound, because Trump has been so even though I was absolutely horrifically disappointed when Trump won the election. I'm not gonna lie. I was. It was. I don't like the guy. I don't like anything about him. I don't think he's done a good job during any portion of his presidency. But all the same, I had optimism. I said, well, okay, at least we're going to get some of our rights back. Maybe we'll see suppressors removed from the NFA. Maybe we'll see the NFA overturned. Maybe we'll see SBRs taken off of the NFA, and we won't have to put SBRs in the registry anymore. Instead, we've walked it back. And I've watched in the comments under my videos, I watched Trump supporters defend his decisions and say, well, it would have been worse under a Democrat. Well, show me the fucking numbers, because right now that's not what the numbers support. The numbers support what you're saying, that it's actually the opposite, because there is that pushback against whichever party is in power from the opposition. So, and the use of executive orders, it basically circumvents the way our system is intended to work. It was bad when Obama did it. It was bad when Bush did it, and it's bad when Trump does it. I'm not saying that executive orders aren't necessary. Sometimes they are, but the way that they're being used right now to circumvent Congress is not the way they were intended to work. They were intended to solve small problems that were sort of beneath Congress's notice, that were time sensitive, so that the president could take care of them imminently. It was not intended to be a workaround for congressional gridlock. I don't like the gridlock, but gridlock is one of the things that has kept our system so stable for all of these years, and it's one of the reasons that we're one of the most stable countries that's ever existed. So gridlock is to the level that we see now is not good, but gridlock in a general sense is not necessarily negative. But the way Trump has sort of wielded his power like a gun is incredibly negative. It set a bad precedent, and we're probably just going to see that shit get worse and worse and worse and worse. So that's a long and rambling way to say, yes, I agree with you. And I'm afraid that if Trump stays in power, I'm afraid we're going to see no suppressors, no more SPRs. Go down the list. Go down the fucking list.
Well, I think people forget how close we were to national concealed carry reciprocity and suppressors being regular 4473'd. Like,
Yeah,
we
to
were
the
so
point.
close.
To the point that when Trump was elected, I thought, oh, we're there. Like, it's happening.
Yeah, I did too. Well, his whole campaign and his 100-day promise specifically laid out all the firearm stuff he was allegedly going to do. And, like, from what I've heard, obviously I don't know any of them, but apparently Donald Trump Jr. is super pro-gun, and that's where some of his better ideas come from. But then Ivanka and Kushner, Jared, are very, New York liberal, Democrat, anti-gun. So he kind of has, the devil and angel on his shoulders influencing his decisions. But pretty much universally, all of the actual outcomes from his stance on firearms has put us back. Like, we were so close to just being able to walk into a gun store and with a regular 4473 buy a suppressor. So close.
Yeah. It seemed almost inevitable.
Now it's completely off the table.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this. Do you think, this is the heartbreaking thing, do you think we will ever be that close again?
Honestly, not in my lifetime, probably.
Yeah.
Unless something dramatically changes. Because it could. Like, just in my lifetime, we went from all 50 states, it being a felony with marijuana, to being either medically or even recreationally legal almost everywhere. Gay marriage was like a decade. It went from totally unacceptable to every single sitcom on TV having gay characters openly. I remember with Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a big deal because it was the first gay kiss on like primetime television, and now it's like Modern Family, like literally every show has a gay character, and it's legal, totally fine. There's a church near me that has a big sign, like had a big Pride Month sign. So like those kind of social issues can move very quickly. So I'm not saying it won't move very quickly, but just, I don't know, every single gun type liberty, freedom, right, every time we get a step forward, it seems like we go 3 steps back. And I just can't imagine the circumstances in my lifetime that would make 51% of the American public be like, suppressors are a useful tool for noise pollution and for not damaging your hearing and for safe hunting and for safe home defense, and not see them as James Bond or John Wick's subway pew 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 machine for assassinations. And I just don't think we're going to win that social battle at this point after the last 4 years. What do you think?
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And I think this comes back to the way that guns are viewed. So I view gay marriage, drug reform, abortion, all of these other sort of human rights. I view guns also as a human right. You have a right to purchase an item that you can use to defend yourself, because I do not like the police. I do not trust the police. The police are generally not helpful. The police often do not have your best interest at heart. I know that is a controversial thing to say. I know that will offend some of you. I don't really give a fuck. So I view guns as a far more useful tool to defend your home and your family and your neighbors and everybody else around you than a phone call. Look at what's happened when the police have showed up at some calls, especially if you're a black person. Calling the cops is probably not a great idea, and that's kind of the way I view it. Yeah, or a white person for that matter. So I think that guns are a great way to defend yourself and to sort of take responsibility for your own life and your own defense. And to me, it's just a civil right, just like any other. So I think we've got to get to a point where we view guns that way, and where we view guns as a way to sort of, liberate ourselves from the yoke of the police and the need for them, the need to constantly have outside intervention from the state. And I'm not saying that cops aren't necessary. They absolutely are necessary. We have to have law enforcement. If the cops are 15 minutes away, you may be put in a situation where you have to handle whatever's happening yourself, or you'll be killed in that 15-minute window. So it's better to just sort of rely on yourself and your own skills in that 15-minute window while you're waiting.
Right, and I think that actually might be a losing issue for Democrats, at least in the short term, because the big argument for banning firearms was, well, that's what the police are for. And now we're seeing a massive swing on the left towards being anti-police militarization, I would say, is probably the best way of saying that, where the police respond with armored cars and EOTech grenade launchers and all that stuff. Grenade launchers with EOTechs on them, and to a noise complaint or something like that. So, I mean, I have to believe it's been like 8 or 10 million guns every month are being sold. That's not just to conservatives. And I've been seeing more and more of my very far left liberal friends who 6 years ago were, every town for gun control or whatever, now are being like, so I know that you're the gun guy. What gun do I buy? Where do I buy a gun? That type of thing. Because we are kind of getting to the point as a society where the police aren't really what the police are intended to do. Should armed men really be showing up to a noise complaint? Should armed men really be, you know what I mean? There's all these situations to a mentally ill person having an episode. All these things all these situations that they're not trained to deal with. And people are being like, oh, maybe my safety is my responsibility. And I've been noticing that a lot, even across, the political spectrum, left, right, center. This has been the catalyst of, when I've been paying attention, where almost everyone is going, I probably need a gun in the house. And I can't see all these new gun owners that purchased an AR-15 because it's the best. And then Biden gets up and says, hey, we're banning them all. I could see just a lot more now, Democrats being like, no, that's not what we voted for. So I could see, at least short term, 1 or 2 election cycles, guns kind of being off the table in that way. Because for the first time, almost all Americans are being like, hey, maybe my household can safely utilize a firearm for the protection of our household. I don't know if you've been noticing that down by you, but Chicago's a pretty liberal area. And pretty much universally, almost everyone I talk to is like, hey, so, yeah, I bought a gun last week. I don't know if you noticed that down by you.
Yeah, I mean, that's been kind of the way things are moving, although I have slightly less faith in my own liberal friends to sort of make that jump to, oh, well, this is now I'm a part of this as well. Or at least, maybe I shouldn't be so cynical, but I worry that they'll sort of go back to, well, the time that I needed the gun has passed, so I'm going to sell it now. I don't need to be a part of this. I don't want to be a part of this. But I hope that's not the case. I've been seeing a lot of sales to people of all kinds, and I hope that continues, and I hope it makes them say, hey, now that I've been around this, I realize that this is really just an essential tool. Because in the past, one of the most baffling parts of the sort of liberal ideology has been this idea that we don't like the police are bad, yet we must rely on the police to save us, as you pointed out. Mm-hmm. It's weird. It's a strange contradiction. So, I'm hoping my optimistic side says, oh, you're absolutely right. That's what's going to happen. But my cynical side worries that groupthink will come back. Because I'm not meaning to just pick on the left here. This is a problem with the left and the right. There is so much social pressure to follow that line absolutely, lest you be kicked out by the group. You see on Twitter, on both sides, left, right, it doesn't matter. Even the libertarians do it. They say, no, you see, that's not what we believe. Therefore, you will now be exiled from the group. That's not what we believe right now. It's changed in the last 24 hours. And I'm afraid that that'll come back, because right now I do feel like we're getting a genuine break from that. And God, I'd like to see it continue.
Yeah, political stuff has kind of taken up the mantle as like the new religious dogma, where you pick your camp and then all other camps are going to hell. And the gun thing, though, right now, that issue as a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, anarchist, communist, socialist, like pretty much every American now, we're kind of united under our "you don't tell me to kneel" type personality type, where it's our responsibility to protect ourselves. And depending on how long the pandemic, the lockdowns, it's looking very much so like we're sliding into a economic severe recession, if not depression. Depending on how long the hardships go on, I could see it becoming a staple of a lot of people's lives on both sides of the political spectrum, Whereas I agree with you, if by next summer we're completely back to normal, I could see a lot of people, like Gun Broker, just being flooded with barely shot firearms for sale. But if it goes on long enough, I think it's just an exposure thing. The more you're exposed to it, the more normal it seems. And if people are exposed to, like, there was several months there where we got the local police department saying, hey, we're not responding unless someone is literally dying right now. And I had a bunch of, middle-aged, privileged, wealthy people being like, holy crap, the police aren't going to come? And it's like, nothing happens at your house anyway, Janet. But, like, even, like, soccer moms are going like, oh, it's only $500 to buy a Glock. Maybe we should have one just in case. And if it's around for a few years and you genuinely feel safer knowing, with some training classes, shooting occasionally, like feeling competent with gun safety, like I can protect myself. I don't understand why it's become a Democrat-Republican thing to protect yourself. Because it's a fundamental basic human right across all cultures ever.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't understand that with a lot of issues in general. I truly don't. It's like how the right will claim to be about personal freedom, but they're really just saying we're all about personal freedom as long as it doesn't interfere with our crazy religious views. You're not.
You can be free as long as you're following our very strict Judeo-Christian rules for life.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then the left is like, we support all civil rights except for this list of civil rights right here. We don't do these ones. The fuck does.
And if you break any of them, even 30 years ago, you are done. You are never working again.
Yeah, that's been the weirdest fucking thing because like I'm a comedian at heart. I say all kinds of wild shit. I like to get a rise out of people. I like to be offensive. It's funny to me. It warms the cockles of my dark little heart whenever I say something and it makes people cringe and go, "Oh God, that was terrible."
We've probably cut out a few jokes from this already that we're like, "Ooh, we should not say that."
Yeah, and it's just I get the sense that you're sort of cut from the same cloth, and it's been very strange to adjust to this new world where we can't just say whatever the fuck. I really don't like it.
Yeah, I don't understand people who hate watch YouTube videos. If I don't like something, I don't watch it. Like, I don't know why that's a novel concept. And if I'm offended and I watch something again, then that's my fault. Like, I would be embarrassed to comment. I've watched 7 of your videos and they all offend me. Go kill yourself or something. It's like, but you chose to watch it. You knew, so you offended you because I just don't understand.
Welcome to my YouTube. No, I really do have a series of commenters who I have made so angry that they watch every video, they dislike it, and then they leave angry stuff. And it's like 5 people that go from video to video. And it's like on the one hand, I'm like, God, I could just block them, but it's too funny. Like my wife and I sit here at night, like we turn on YouTube and we're like, oh my God, look at this one. It's so fucking funny. I love it.
People talk about true fans, but that is a true fan. To follow you and hate watch, that is a true fan. I think I have 2 or 3 people who do the same thing and they just dislike every video the second it's uploaded. And at first I thought it might be someone I pissed off. Now, honestly, I think it might be anti-gun people who just go to YouTube videos and dislike all the gun stuff. That's my current running theory, because I've had some definite jackasses comment and stuff, but it's very rare. Most gun people tend to be okay. I think it's anti-gun people on YouTube for like makeup videos and stuff, and they just found out that there's gun videos and they just dislike them all. And like I even saw on some everyday carry updates, there was this, I think he was an Australian guy, or English guy, and he was commenting on all of them, like, oh, you have such a small dick, you have to carry all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. In my town, we don't have to fear that kind of stuff. You guys are all Rambo, you stupid Americans. And so, like, that was a dislike, for sure. And I feel like there's some people like that go around and just dislike everything. So I don't know if you have as many haters as you think. That would be my running theory.
Wow. Well, thank you for just completely taking the wind out of my sails. But,
I'm sure you still have a few really true fans that hate watch everything you do.
Well, in
you
some
have
cases,
way more fans than me, so.
Well, I don't know about that, but in some cases, like the ones that I'm referring to actually comment every time. Like it's always the same user.
Oh, yeah.
Like they, it's always, it's like, Sacklicker66 says, another piece of shit video. And I'm like, yes, it is a piece of shit. And you're the one who watched it. And I had to edit it. So I already know it's a piece of shit because I had to look at it for 20 hours. So you're not telling me anything that I don't know. I had to watch the goddamn thing. So moving back actually to some of the topics at hand. Yeah, we'll keep it quick.
I don't think we can.
So our last topic today, the internet has been aflame for the last 4 weeks or so talking about The Last of Us 2.
I would say since the leaks, it's been a long time. The internet's been aflame with The Last of Us 2. Because remember the leaks like 6 months ago?
Oh shit, you're right. Yeah. Okay,
it's been a nightmare since then.
For 2 seasons, the internet has been aflame with Last of Us 2 controversy. So I think that you and I took some issues with The Last of Us 2, but not for the reasons that everyone else did. So everybody else, the trolls of the internet freaked out because they didn't like that there were a lot of women in it, and they didn't like that there was people who aren't exactly like them in it, and other things such as that, things that they normally get mad about. Trans people, gay people, the stuff that makes, angry white internet fucks really, really angry. I didn't have a problem with any of that stuff. I just thought that the way the story was structured was strange. The setting is strange. And I think that the game is pointlessly, bizarrely nihilistic. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to go back in time, are we doing spoilers?
Spoil away. Spoil the fuck out of it.
Okay.
Just spoil it.
So the next however many minutes, the game is going to be spoiled. So if you care, you've already played it, so don't write us about it. So about 6 months ago, we'll start at the beginning. Allegedly, an angry Naughty Dog employee released all the story beats for The Last of Us 2 and set the internet aflame. So they posted up screenshots where Joel, the main character from The Last of Us, the original game, allegedly was beaten to death. They said that there was a trans character named Abby. They would be the main playable character. Like, all this stuff was released, and the internet went crazy. Like, is that an understatement, or would you say they went crazy?
That seems completely fair to me. I mean, I would say that the internet was rabidly angry, like foaming at the mouth angry.
Yeah.
It was insane.
It was a mess. It was a mess. So then we found out that it was actually I believe it was a hacker or something went into the development code and pulled stuff from it. It had nothing to do with the Naughty Dog employees, right? Is that what finally was the answer?
Yeah, there was a way into the Naughty Dog servers that was actually through, I think it may have been the Uncharted 3 multiplayer source code or something like that. Some fancy computer jargon, but it involved prior Naughty Dog games.
It's so crazy people can do that.
Yeah.
It is so crazy people can do that. But okay, so they got it. A lot of the stuff in the leak was wrong, but a few of the main key things were right. Joel, the main protagonist, does die. Naughty Dog had lied. You don't play as Ellie the whole time. You play half the game as Ellie and half the game as a new character named Abby. And the new character, Abby, is the person who kills Joel. So all that stuff was true. And that's not the issues we had with it, right? That wasn't the issues I had with the game, because the way The Last of Us ended, Joel was going to die eventually. I think you and I talked about it. We would have done it differently, like significantly differently.
Very differently.
Joel was going to die. Joel was eventually going to die.
Yeah, you can't have a character make a decision like that with lasting repercussions for the world and all the people in it, and have him walk away consequence free. I know Druckmann and a few other people have talked about that, and I agree with that assessment. But the way that it was executed is ludicrously strange, and I don't understand the way the story was structured or why. And it seems to me that surely there were multiple people in the writer's room. It's not like Druckmann wrote it alone. Surely someone would have said, hey, there's a much better way to structure this story for maximum emotional impact.
Right, and without a character assassination of the main characters we've grown to love. So I hate when people call Joel the hero, or he is the protagonist of the first game, but he's a bad dude. And they could have easily not changed much in the first 2 or 3 hours of the game. But if they would have just... Because, like, the main problem is Joel saves Abby, and then he tells Abby that, oh, this is me and my brother, and my name's Joel. And she, you know, finds out that he was the one who killed her father, who was the doctor in the first game. And so Abby kills him in front of Ellie. Which would... I think it was a waste of the character. But... one way, I was brainstorming this since we talked last, one way they could have fixed that without changing anything else in the game is to show Joel and Tommy and Ellie and all these people in this town. Joel feels really bad about what he did in the past, so he's trying to change and be more friendly and be more calm, because one of the problems they had was it was so out of character for Joel to just immediately tell strangers his name when he knows he's a high-profile person. And so, like, in the first game, he survived for 25 years. Because this game is, like, 5 years or so after the first game. And I think it's about 25 years since the virus plague outbreak. So he survived for 25 years being ruthless. And, like, in the first game, there was that one guy in the street, and Ellie's like, oh, we gotta go help him. He's like, no, this is a trap, and just runs him over. And sure enough, it was a trap. And, like, the whole first game, for, like, 12 hours, you're shown how smart and cunning and ruthless Joel is. And then in this game, he's just an absolute idiot the entire time he's alive. And it makes zero sense. And the way you could have fixed that super easily without reformatting the game, because me and you talked extensively about how we would structure the game differently. If you didn't want to structure the game any differently at all and just fix that one small problem, you could just have like some exposition and dialogue and show Joel trying to be a more kind, repetitive person. And that would make it make sense, right? He's trusting people for the first time. He's trying to be better. He stayed in this one safe town for so long that his defenses are down. So, like, there's just things like that throughout the entire, how long did it take you? It took me like 20 hours.
I mean, for me, it was longer than that. I mean, it's like 35, but I don't know. I looked for every little piece. I looked for every little fucking thing, and, you know,
Did you play on a hard difficulty?
I played on normal, but I think it was just the way that I play those games is I walk through every corner of every room and I look for every little document and it's really, my wife has told me it's actually really annoying to watch me play because I have to look at everything.
Well, I might be underestimating the amount of time. I thought like 20 hours, maybe it was like 25, but like, there was stupid little silly things like that the entire game where it just makes no sense, and they kind of like assassinate the characters that we've grown to like, and there's just so many better ways. Like, I really liked Abby and Lev. They were probably the highlight of the game for me, and I really liked the Ellie revenge story. But the problem is that first 8 hour, 8, 10, 12, depending on how you play it, of Ellie's story up until the theater was so compelling, and then you just screech to a halt and start over with Abby, and then Abby's story gets super compelling over 10, 12 hours, and then you screech to a halt and go back, and it was just so jarring how every hour or so there's a flashback that stops your current, and like there was even this one part where there was a flashback inside a flashback of a flashback, and it's just, why would you format it this way? Why was the game set up this way? The story itself I wouldn't have chosen, but it didn't make me angry. Like, apparently it made a lot of people angry. It was just the seemingly incompetence of the pacing that I had a huge issue with. I've rambled enough. Why don't you talk now?
No. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's my issue with it as well, is not the core story. Although, like you said, I would have written a different one. But the core story is fine. The problem is in the telling. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about bigger changes that we would have made, because I still think that there is a better story available here from these characters. But you know, and a lesson to writers out there everywhere. If you find flashbacks are not lazy. Like, I don't mean to give that impression. Flashbacks are an excellent tool. I'm not saying that they're lazy. They're great. They can be great, but you have to ask yourself, if I'm having to backtrack constantly to tell this story the right way, I've made a mistake somewhere else. What mistake is that, and what can I do to fix it? Because you shouldn't need that much expository information to move your story forward. Otherwise, that means that you've written a character whose motivations are senselessly unclear, or maybe a character whose actions don't properly indicate who they are. And so you need to show something in the past that explains that. So you probably have an issue with another part of your story if you're having to rely so heavily on flashbacks. My biggest problem with the story, though, overall, as it is, before we get into what we would radically change, is the length coupled with the setting. So the first game takes place across America. It's this epic, sweeping story with beautiful locations across many seasons. It takes place over an entire year. And you see these characters grow and morph and change, some for the better, some for the worse, based on the terrible things or good things that happen to them. This game takes place really over 3 days, with the exception of, the flashbacks and what happens during the first 3 hours. And it all takes place within one city that looks very much the same. And I got the sense, like I was constantly having deja vu. Oh, we're back in another area where there's grass here and the buildings are here and they're dilapidated, and then I'm gonna walk over here, I'm gonna kill those people and then walk through, and then I'm gonna do it again in the next section. There's no variation. The environment itself, by the end of it, I was like, just let it fucking end. And thank God the game goes somewhere different at the very end. Thank Christ. It's sort of the opposite of Uncharted 4, where it was constantly a fresh location with a fresh take on combat. It's the complete opposite of that. What did you think about the location?
The location I did not have a problem with. I thought it was beautiful. The problem I had was the first game was so diverse, which is kind of what you were saying, that you got constantly new, pretty things to look at. This game, not only are all the locations kind of look the same, but also you play most of the locations twice, once from Abby's perspective and once from Ellie's perspective, which makes them feel recycled and lazy, even though it makes, thematic story sense. It's still like, come on, guys, you couldn't, pick a different location. Like, you go through Abby's base several times, because you go through it in flashbacks, you go through it in modern, you go through it. It's just at some point, it gets boring. And then also, I think the problem that The Last of Us 2 has, that The Last of Us 1 never never discovered, was The Last of Us 2, gameplay-wise, I think personally peaked really early on. So there's that one long section where you're going, it's Seattle or Portland? I always want to say Portland, but I think it's Seattle.
Yeah, it's Seattle.
Seattle? I keep wanting to say Portland. I don't know, maybe Portlandia, but there's that one section early on with Ellie where you're kind of free roaming a fairly large area, and you get to pick which order you go in buildings, and each building feels like its own little story, and it's really nice. There's this one part where you're like in a bank vault, and like there's the story of this guy who, when the virus broke out 25 years ago, they were going to rob the bank, but then people started getting bit and freaking out, so he got locked in the bank vault, and he's writing all these notes. Like, there's just so much fun stuff to discover. There's fun platforming. There's fantastic banter between you and Dina, and then you go back to linear story for, like, pretty much the rest of the game. And it was just a bummer to me that, like, the game peaked so early because it felt novel and new and interesting. And if they would have coupled that level design with a shorter story, more concise story, I think it could have been a magical experience, because I don't have a problem with the story and I don't have a problem with the characters outside of stupid decisions, and like, it was just too long and the pacing was so off, and then it peaked early on, so the rest of the game I was like, man, what if we would have had that type of game? You know what I mean? It just let me have a taste of something that it never fulfilled for me.
Yeah, which Uncharted 4 had several sections like that, multiple ones, and then Uncharted: The Lost Legacy had a huge one that takes up roughly a third of the overall game.
Uncharted is a great comparison as well, because like Uncharted peaks early on as well, but then it gets better from there. So like, I'm all the way back to Uncharted 2 with the train, and Uncharted 3 there's that like cool bar fight and everything, and Uncharted 4, like, the game started off so strong and cinematic and compelling, but then it doesn't stop there. It gets better from there. And The Last of Us' opening is genre defining. Like, people still talk about that game and the first 30 minutes of that game, and it's 10 years later, 8 years later. And I don't think The Last of Us 2 will have that appeal, because it peaks so early on, but then never gets past that point again.
Yeah, agreed. And then so now let's talk a little bit about radical changes that we would make. That we've talked before about how we both love Abby and Lev. You know, I really, really,
Yes.
really like those two characters. And we've also talked about how really, if they're going to leave the story as is, it needed to be two separate games. Hell, release them at the same
Yes.
time, but it needed to be two separate games. Or hell, two separate campaigns on the same disc. I don't know, just something different. The story needed to be told in a different way. But
When you mentioned Lost, what was the Uncharted game? Lost Legacy?
The Lost Legacy, yeah.
Yeah, when you mentioned that, it feels like the Ellie game is Uncharted 2. I mean, Last of Us 2. And it feels like the Abby and Lev game is like in Lost Legacy.
I agree.
It definitely would have felt better if it was split up.
Yeah, because in much the same way, Chloe and Nadine are absolutely just as compelling as Nate and Sam. In fact, you know, I'm a huge Chloe fan. I fucking love Chloe. She's one of the greatest video game characters of all time. Claudia Black does an amazing job. Just a great character, and I love Nadine. And Laura Bailey, who plays Nadine, also plays Abby in The Last of Us too.
She's great.
But yeah, I completely agree with you. Those characters are so compelling. It almost did a disservice to Abby and Lev to stick them in that way, knowing that fans would not respond well to them. And I understand that Druckmann was trying to do a thing and trying to make you, you know, analyze how you feel about hate and violence and whatever the fuck else. That's all great and good, but theme should never come before story. Telling a good story and a compelling story is all that fucking matters. Theme is great if you can pull it off, but it should not be nothing. You shouldn't set up the entire story to service theme. And that's what we have here. If you split it up, that doesn't happen to the same degree. But I think you and I talked about how we would entirely restructure the story. What would you do to keep the same characters but completely rework everything?
I would have taken the basic idea of 2 and turned it into 3, the second and third game. So the overall arc of the game is Ellie's story, right? So the first game you play as Joel, mostly for the majority of the game. But Joel's not the main character, right? It's just kind of like if you look at Star Wars, like we have different protagonists, but the basic story is the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker. So the basic arc of The Last of Us will be Ellie's character, her growth as a character in this destroyed, horrible world. The second game, we would have introduced Abby, and it would have gone down much like the second game, the Abby parts, where she's with the group and Owen and I forget the pregnant lady's name, but Manny. I really liked Manny, and then, you know, all that goes down. She's kind of exiled. She's with Lev. And then after that part of the game with Lev, and then Lev leaves to go do the whole part of the story with the mom and the sister. Then we have the part where she meets Joel and Ellie's group. And at that point, I don't know how long Ellie and Abby will be friends, but she finds out Joel and kills Joel, and then that's the cliffhanger for the second game. And then the third game is the cat and mouse, Ellie versus Abby, but at this point we really like Abby and we really like Ellie, so it's like an actual problem. And if Naughty Dog wanted to get crazy with it, they could do the game where you pick which character you want to play, and then you have replay value because you could do both characters. That was my initial idea because I didn't want to change too much of the story. It would be basically the same story, just formatted differently, so that hopefully not everyone just immediately hates Abby, because I really liked Abby, but I understand the criticism with how Naughty Dog formulated the game to make you feel like a bad person for not liking Abby. Like, I think Naughty Dog wanted you to feel like a bad person for not liking Abby. I think that was part of the point.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, this villain you don't like, look, they're a person too. And then for 10 hours or 12 hours, they ram you over the head with how bad of a person you are, even though you had no choice in the matter. So, like, when you're playing as Ellie, they force you to kill Abby's dog. You don't know it's Abby's dog. But then the first time you take control of Abby, they have you rescuing a zebra with her dad, and they have you playing with the dog that Ellie kills, and they're just, like, trying to pull at your heartstrings, but you had no control over it. So, like, it would have made more of an impact if you chose to kill Abby's dog. You know what I mean? They took the choice away, but then expect you to still feel bad about it. So the way I reformatted the game was to focus on Abby for a game so that you like her too, and then still do the same revenge thing for the third game. But but then you care about both characters instead of hating Abby. And like when Abby fights Ellie and you're Abby, I didn't want to fight Ellie, you know? Which was the point. Naughty Dog wanted you not to want to fight Ellie. But if you play The Last of Us 2 and like Abby better, you might choose for Abby to win in the third game. So I just thought it would be a compelling way to split it up and make the choices a little bit more fair. However, you and I got talking about it, and I like the way that you formatted it better. So now it's your turn, and really wow us with your idea.
Oh wow, no fucking pressure. So I would introduce Abby. You play as Abby for maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 hours. She meets Lev, and Lev sort of becomes her friend and adventuring partner. Well, she and Lev get, and Owen and everybody else get word that maybe the person that she's looking for is in Jackson. So the group leaves to go look for this person. Some sort of adventuring happens, and she ends up linking up with Ellie and Joel, not realizing that's who it is. And you go on the remainder of her adventure with all three of them together. And over the course of this adventure, she comes to be really, really good friends with Ellie, and she likes Joel, but she's also discovering these little clues along the way that show that Joel might be the guy. So she almost stands in for the audience, where even though Joel is this bad guy who's done these terrible things, she finds that she comes to really respect him and love him in the same way that we do, and Ellie in the same way that we do. But at the end of the game, she realizes, holy shit, these are the people who killed my dad, my best friend. My new best friend, Ellie, killed my dad and doomed humanity to not have a vaccine to the cordyceps fungus. And then the third game would be the fallout from this. She confronts Joel and says she's going to kill him, but in the end something happens, and Joel actually still dies, but he dies saving Abby because he loves Ellie so much that he would die to save Ellie's best friend and preserve her from the heartbreak of losing another one of her friends. But Ellie doesn't see it that way, and Ellie absolutely hates Abby. She chases Abby across the country, maybe. Abby doesn't hate Ellie after what happened. She understands that Ellie was a child, and she doesn't hate Joel either, but Ellie cannot get past what happened and holds Abby responsible for Joel's death. And their chase across America is sort of the third game, and in the end, they actually reconcile. And their sort of friendship is supposed to give us the sense that this new generation growing up in this world is going to be okay. Joel's death kind of represents the end of the old way of doing things, and maybe this cycle of violence is finally over.
Slow clap. I tried when I was thinking about my formatting. No, I like it a lot. When I was thinking about my formatting, I tried not to change anything because I didn't want to change the basic structure of Neil Druckmann's vision for it. I just think it would be much better split up in a 2-act game where he doesn't have to manipulate you emotionally to like Abby, because I think Abby, especially with Lev, would be a likable enough character if they paced it differently. So even if they had taken the same game at the same length, and instead of doing 10 hours, if they would have split Ellie and Abby, their parts like back to back, so Act 1, Act 1, Act 2, Act 2, Act 3, Act 3, I even think it would be less emotionally manipulative that way. And he just set it up so no one is going to like Abby, and I think that's a bummer, because especially her and Lev, like that was what I wanted from The Last of Us 2. The Naughty Dog formula is a likable, charming main protagonist with a kind of sarcastic or interesting or, depressing or some sort of interesting play off the main character following you around, and that banter and dialogue. And the parts with Abby and Lev, I got that, and it was such a small part of the game, and I wish that was the whole game. Like, I wish they would have cut out the Ellie part altogether, because I liked the Abby and Lev part so much.
Yeah.
But your way, you would have had to restructure the whole second and third game, But I think that would have been a more cohesive and better arc that I personally would have liked to see more, because it's not just like smash you in the face nihilism. What's the point of all this? You have no choice, and you should feel terrible about it, and you suck, and buy our next game, which is the way that The Last of Us 2 felt, where The Last of Us 1 was very dark and dour as well, but there was still hope. And the second game kind of took away all the hope and told you that the people you like are the bad guys. Yeah. Which while creatively it was an interesting creative exercise, I don't think it succeeded.
Yeah, and it's not like that's a super original idea anyway. The humans were the monsters the whole time. Yeah, it's
right.
You know,
yeah,
it's
like
just,
every zombie movie ever, every post-apocalyptic movie. I mean, that was even Omega Man, I Am Legend.
Oh yeah, that's what I was thinking.
He's fighting the vampires, but he's the monster the whole time. Like it's a moral as old as time. But Neil apparently, you know, because he's one of those visionary types, thought that he was, you know, the second reincarnation of Jesus, and this is the best story ever, and we're really gonna make you feel. We're gonna force you to kill the dog. Can you believe it? It's Abby's dog. Go play fetch for 20 minutes. Like, it was just also. The way he set it up was so emotionally manipulative, it turned me off. Even though, like, I could look past that and still appreciate. And we've kind of been dogging on the game quite a bit, pun intended. But, like, it is beautiful. It plays so well. A lot of people don't like the Naughty Dog style of combat. I think I love the way it controls, because it's sloppy and fast. And it feels like you're not a professional gunslinger, you know what I mean? Like in Call of Duty, you can headshot someone from, you know, 700 yards away with your M9 Beretta, and like The Last of Us feels sloppy, and you're constantly frantic, and like it is easier to hide. If you can hide in The Last of Us, like every single time. So the gameplay I thought was great. The scavenging got really tedious because the game was so long, but that's not a problem with the gameplay. It's a problem with the length of the game. The graphics are stunning. I really liked the soundtrack. I thought the score was wonderful. The voice acting is like medium defining. It is so good. I don't know. Well, there was a lot of pros. The only con to me was the story, which is why we've been focusing on it. But the game itself is expertly put together. It's expertly crafted, and you can really feel all those those unpaid late nights working on the game.
yeah, you can practically feel the misery. Yeah, so and you know it is a weird thing when a game has perfect gameplay, perfect performances, and I almost feel weird calling them voice acting, because you know it is mocapped on a real stage. You know it works so differently than traditional voice acting, and as a result, the performances are there's nothing comparable. As you said, it's medium defining.
It's the first video game that is as nuanced in the performance as any movie ever. Like the Troy Baker especially. I don't know what it is about that guy, but like Troy Baker and I'm totally spacing on her name. The girl who played Dina. I mean, not Dina, Abby.
Laura Bailey.
Laura Bailey is so good. Constantly. And I don't know if anyone else could have made you like Abby as much as she makes you like Abby. And I'm spacing on Ellie too. I don't have any of the names pulled up. Troy Baker's the only one I remember because of Bioshock. I don't know. All the actors, like, their performances are so nuanced. You're right, it's almost a disservice to call it voice acting. But what I thought was interesting is not all the faces, not all the actors are the voices. So, like, Dina's face was acted by someone other than her voice. And that adds a whole new level of complexity.
Yeah, well, it's that her body was acted, you know, like her motions are that they just scanned someone else, like her body model is someone else. But no, it was
so
Laura
the
Bailey
facial
did
construction model.
Yeah, Laura Bailey did all of the mocap, but why do I know so much about Naughty Dog? It makes me feel like a fucking weirdo. But Laura Bailey did all of the motion capture, but they actually scanned another likeness. Now, one of the things they did differently for this game versus Uncharted, for Uncharted, they create character models. Like, those aren't scans of real people. Like, there's no fucking Victor Sullivan wandering around out there somewhere, you know, trying to feel up ladies in a bar somewhere. Those models are just created. But in in the case, and Joel and Ellie were just created, but most of the other people were scans of real actors that then their physical forms, the models are animated by the people by the actors in the mocap suits doing the performance.
That's because no human being alive looks as dashing as Nathan Drake.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, who would actually look like that and could still climb like a gibbon at the age of 45?
Yeah, right.
Shimmy up there like a gibbon.
That is some grip strength. Holy crap.
Yeah, he's been using his grip genie.
That's why he reloads AKs and stuff the way he does.
That's
right.
He
has such a strong grip, he'll break the guns.
Yeah, that's right. That's why he passes it to his other hand and sticks the mag in. Yeah. And this game has really sharply reminded me that Uncharted 4 and The Lost Legacy were the masterpieces that defined this genre. In that no third-person story-driven game, even The Last of Us 2, has even come close to the accomplishments of those two games. And, The Last of Us 4 came out 4 years ago now. It's just that they had the formula so perfect in 2016, and they had the performances so perfect. And really, the graphics between Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us 2 are not particularly different. The lighting has improved a lot, but in terms of the texture quality, there's not a huge difference between them.
Lighting has improved for sure, and then also like the actual facial expressions. Everything else, I mean, it does not show its age yet. The Uncharted 4 looks fantastic still.
It does. It's still one of the best looking games ever. But the problems with Uncharted 2's story have made me love Uncharted 4 all over again, because Uncharted 4, the story is so fucking tight, and it is so, but yet sweeping and epic all at the same time, with all of these diverse locations and diverse subplots and all of these little moments where you can explore and they flesh out the characters. I just wish that The Last of Us 2, I wish that the story had not been so concerned with fulfilling certain thematic qualities and just focused on being a good story.
There was this writer, I forget who it was, but I remember reading the story, and in his later years, he was a professor. And for one of his creative writing classes, he would have the class read a short story that he wrote and then, break it down in the, capital L literary way, tell you the themes and all the technical parts of the story that people like to talk about. And he would have the class write this whole paper on this story and everything. And then at the end, he would tell them what the actual intention behind the story was. And it was a story, I forget what the story was, but, all these students would write these long, sweeping essays on all the tones and themes and the reason behind this and the character studies. And then at the end of the class, he was like, I just wrote this story about a guy going to get a waffle. Like, it really had no meaning past that. And the point of the story was, you tell a story, you don't tell the theme. People find the theme that relates to them. It's the same reason why you can interpret the Bible in like 50 different ways, right?
Yeah.
Both the North and the South were using the Bible. The U.S. and Hitler were using the Bible. Like, everyone thinks of themselves as a hero, and you see your intentions in whatever media you're consuming. That's what's so beautiful about art, is you can see what's relevant to you at your part of life in the art you're consuming. So, like, one of the problems with a lot of these, like, really highfalutin, like, oh, I'm an artiste type of people, is they try to inject the theme they want you to take out of it. And I think that was one of the problems, is Neil, like, injected his so ham-fistedly, it almost kind of felt like a Bible tract, where it's like, this is what you get out of this little morality tale. And I think it would have been more effective if you just told a story about Ellie and Joel and Abby, and you could take whatever theme you wanted out of it, or what related to you out of it. I don't know if that's relevant to what you were thinking, but that's what kept popping into my head.
No, that's exactly what I mean. And just as an example, we can look at Druckmann's own writing to see where he did that properly in other places. But you can tell that in those places, he had folks working with him who were able to rein in his worst tendencies and sort of distill his core idea. Yeah. So a great example. Sorry, go ahead.
That's one of the things with the Matrix movies, was the first Matrix, I think, is a masterpiece.
Me
nothing
too.
has even come close since, even though everything has copied them since 2001 or whenever that movie came out. But then it was such a smash success on such a tight budget that the studio WB just kind of gave the Wachowskis, just kind of gave them free reign for the second and third movie, and they're absolute clusterfucks because no one told them no. Same thing with George Lucas. Like, the best Star Wars movies are the ones George Lucas had the least of a hand in because he created such an amazing world. But then when you're given free reign, like, he just went off the wall crazy. And Neil Druckmann, you were telling me about the Uncharted 4 problem. And
Yeah.
I agree with you. Uncharted 4 is a masterpiece because they let Nathan Drake be the hero. And even though it's epic and somber, it's also a character study. And even though it is somber at times, it leaves him with a legacy. And it leaves him with a character you still really like. And The Last of Us kind of confused that with tearing down your characters, showing you all their flaws, showing you, like, it's kind of like what Spec Ops: The Line did like 10 years ago, where you find out that maybe you were the bad guy all along. But Spec Ops does it where you made the choices, and The Last of Us makes the choices for you, but then tells you all the characters you love are evil. And you were telling me that's kind of Neil Druckmann's MO, but he had people helping him. So do you want to explain that story? Because that really opened my eyes. And you're right, it shows what a masterpiece Uncharted 4 is. And it was Neil Druckmann's vision, but kind of molded by other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So he took over Uncharted 4 when Amy Hennig departed, and I don't know, maybe it was 20. Might have been 2013. I don't remember when she left Naughty Dog, but anyway, so he's hot off of the Last of Us, the Last of Us, the first one, and to backtrack a little bit, in The Last of Us, we see that he is just focused on telling a very good story. He also had other people reining him in, though, in that case as well. We see nothing but the best elements of his story distilled by other people. We have the nihilism and the darkness, but it has the Naughty Dog hope and levity and sort of just general emotionality that they bring to everything, where you feel the entire range of human experiences over the course of the game. Well, so he's pulled in to basically take over Uncharted 4 along with one other person, and he wants to completely change Amy Hennig's vision because he felt that it was too light, and he'd always sort of felt that the way she did things was maybe a little too happy and a little too friendly. So he wants to make it as dark as possible. Rumor has it that he actually wanted to kill Nathan at the end, or possibly another character, possibly Sam. Maybe Sully. Those are just the rumors. Nobody really knows. I think anyway. People essentially said, the people around him said, that's a terrible idea. That's not going to work. That's not in the spirit of Uncharted. This does not feel like Uncharted. So they took the introspective elements, the character study, the sort of intense personal change that Nathan undergoes, and how the game is also sort of a study of adult domestic life and what that means to sort of give up who you were in your youth, and all of those themes that become very important to us as we age. And so it's something that I've certainly related to myself. Well, the folks around him said, this still has to be a fun game with a great story, an Uncharted story, an epic swashbuckling story. And so as a result, we just get the best of what Neil Druckmann brings to the table and the best of what Uncharted naturally brings. And because of that, we have the masterpiece of this generation. But what if we hadn't? Can you imagine if Neil Druckmann had been allowed to just sort of turn Uncharted 4 into whatever the fuck he felt like? That's not Uncharted. That's just Nathan Drake transplanted into this terrible thing, this dark, nihilistic, brutal world. That doesn't sound very appealing. That's also not Uncharted. So anyway, that's the story as it's generally told, kind of pieced together from rumors.
Yeah, that was fascinating because you can definitely, that's all I see now, is this kind of like, to bring it back to the political discussion, like conservatives and liberals need each other, because the liberals are the ones that make society better, and the conservatives are the ones that make sure that doesn't destroy the economy and the country. And you know what I mean? We need that constant fighting. We need that gridlock. We need that push-pull, yin-yang. There's a bunch of words for it. But, like, we need Neil Druckmann's nihilistic realism, but we also need the Casey Heinig, like, optimistic, swashbuckling, fun, idealistic, I think would be a good word. So when you have the idealistic gridlocked with the realism. You get the Nathan Drake that has consequences and is somber and is growing as a character, but you also get the fun and the laughter and the jokes and the banter, and it's such a good balance that I think this game, Last of Us 2, a nice way to close it is The Last of Us 2 is in stark contrast to Uncharted 4 as a perfect balance and then swinging too nihilistic. Because we could have gotten something like Uncharted 4, and instead, since The Last of Us and Uncharted 4 were so successful, they kind of let Neil Druckmann Wachowski it or George Lucas it, and it went off the rails, in my opinion. And it's frustrating because it was so close. With just an hour of me and you brainstorming, I feel like we came up with better ways to do it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a shame. And sorry for going on so long about this. I just think that there have been so many negative opinions of the game that I feel like were rooted in politics and just bigotry or the opposite. Just politics in general, left, right. Bullshit and chitter chattering. And also I agree with you as well that a healthy society has a balance of left and right, and I 100% agree with that. That's what keeps a government healthy. But I think that we're trying to bring a different perspective here to we're trying to say, yes, the game has problems, but they aren't the problems that you think. This core story could have been sound, and it could have been salvaged if some changes had been made.
Yeah, to put a button on that, personally, I am willing to say that my favorite character was Lev. So
yeah,
we don't have the same problems as some of the 4chan trolls.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and I enjoyed, my favorite part of the game was the interaction between Abby and Lev. And I think one of the other issues that you and I had discussed is that my big problem was that I didn't get enough Lev. He's such an awesome character. No. I needed more. It was too spare.
I remember the most of what I remember from the game is the controversial moments and Abby and Lev, like their banter, their platforming, their talking while fighting clickers and stuff. Like it was such an impression on me. And then when I look back on the game, how little Lev and Abby were actually in it together is kind of mind-boggling because that's most of what I remember.
Yeah, it was a wasted opportunity.
Seconded.
Well, hey, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for sticking it out with us almost 2 fucking hours. We really appreciate it, and we will be back soon with more practical. I can't even remember the name of our own podcast. Practical Tactical Penguin Podcast.
It'll be on the title of the video, so you don't have to remember it.
I need cue cards.